In 1986, 15 children boarded a school bus for a field trip in Holstead County, Texas. They never came back. No crash, no bodies, no evidence. The bus was gone, the teacher was gone, and for nearly 4 decades no one could explain what happened. But then a construction crew broke ground near Morning Lake, and something buried long ago came to the surface. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury, and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name's Lana Whitaker. I'm 51 now. I was raised in Holstead County and still live here. Folks around here don't leave unless they have to, and I never did. I've been with the sheriff's department for most of my adult life. You could say I know every bend in the road, every porch light, every trail that winds between the pines. It's the kind of place where things don't change fast, or at all. The fog rolls in each spring and clings to the trees like it has a secret. You learn to live with that quiet, patient slow. Back then, my life was fine. Simple. I had my morning routine, my work, my quiet little house on County Road 7. I liked knowing where everything was and how the world was supposed to work. People say that kind of predictability is boring. I thought it was safe. I just poured my first cup of coffee when the call came in. It was May 5th, about 7:10 in the morning. The fog was thick that day, low to the ground, blurring everything beyond a few feet. When the dispatch radio crackled, I nearly spilled the mug in my hand. Possible discovery near Morning Lake Pines, buried vehicle yellow, possible match to old plates requesting sheriff on site. My hand froze midair. My other reached for the notepad by the toaster, but I didn't need to write it down. I already knew. The Holstead Ridge Elementary Field Trip, May 19, 1986. 15 students, 1 substitute teacher, 1 part-time bus driver. Gone. I was supposed to be on that trip, but I'd come down with chickenpox 2 days before. My mom kept me home, and I spent that morning in bed watching cartoons through a fever. That one absence has followed me ever since. Not loudly, just there, like a splinter under the skin. I didn't even touch the coffee. Left the mug in the sink, grabbed my keys, and didn't bother locking the front door. I just drove. The road to Morning Lake is narrow and worn. Pines rise up on both sides like quiet witnesses. The deeper you go, the less sound you hear. Even the birds hold back. I passed the old ranger station, boarded up now, and turned onto a dirt road I hadn't thought about in years. It used to lead to a summer nature camp. That's where the field trip was headed. Cabins, a lake, campfire programs. The last trip before summer break. Everyone had been excited. Disposable cameras, Walkmans, little cartoon backpacks. I remember those faces. Every single one of them. They were my classmates. When I arrived, the construction crew had already pulled back the brush. The tip of something yellow was visible through the dirt, sun-faded, cracked, half buried in roots and time. A foreman met me near the edge of the dig. We didn't touch anything once we saw what it was, he said. But you'll want to see this. I walked over. I didn't speak. They'd cleared enough of the rear to open the emergency door. The smell hit first stale wet, like old earth and rust. Inside, the seats were still in place. A pink lunchbox sat under the third row. One small shoe covered in moss rested near the back step. No bodies. The bus was empty. But taped to the dash was a piece of notebook paper, a class list. Miss Delaney's handwriting, she'd been our teacher. At the bottom, scrawled in red marker, was something else. We never made it to Morning Lake. I stood there staring through the open door into that dark shell of a bus, the pine trees pressing in around us. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out. But it didn't sound like a song. It sounded like a warning. I turned to the foreman. "Seal off the area," I said. "No one touches anything until the state gets here, because whatever happened back in 1986, it had just begun to surface. And that bus, it came back without them. The rest of that day didn't move like time normally does. After we sealed the site, I drove straight to the old records building. It's the kind of place you forget exists until you need it. Stale air, low ceiling fans, the smell of paper and lemon cleaner that never quite leaves the walls. The case file was stored under a closed designation, Holstead Ridge Elementary, May 1986, Trip 6B. The clerk had to use both hands just to slide it across the counter like it might fall apart. I carried it to a back desk and opened the lid. Inside were the Xeroxed faces of 15 kids, class lists, statements, a report stamped in red missing persons, presumed lost. No evidence of foul play. That stamp had lived like a scar in this town. No evidence, no answers. And for a long time, no one wanted to look deeper. But I had always remembered. The driver's name was Carl Davis. He was new, barely vetted. He vanished too. No trace, no exit record, no family to speak of. Miss Delaney, the kid's regular teacher, had called in sick that morning. The district had brought in a substitute, someone named M. Atwell. I'd never heard the name before. The address listed on her form now led to an overgrown lot near the county line. No forwarding records. No trace of her either. I sat back in my chair and stared at the class photo. Even through the faded copy, I could still make out the details. Nora Kelly III from the left. Green eyes, gap-toothed smile, a pink ribbon in her hair. She'd lived 2 doors down from me as a kid. We used to eat popsicles on the curb every summer. My hand was still dusty from the bus when someone knocked on the office door. It was Deputy Harris. His face was pale. "Sheriff, we need to get to County General, now. The hospital lights always feel too bright." That day was no different. The woman they'd found had been discovered by a couple out fishing barefoot, disoriented half a mile from the dig site. She was dehydrated, bruised in spots, and wearing clothes nobody recognized, loose, outdated, not from any local store. No ID, no phone. She kept telling the nurse she was 12 years old. But she wasn't. She looked mid-30s, maybe older. The nurse met me outside the room, handed me a clipboard. "She's stable. No injuries except exposure. Mentally. We think trauma. But you need to see the name she gave." At the top, in shaky handwriting, Nora Kelly. My knees went soft for half a second. Inside the room, she sat on the bed. Thin frame, tangled hair, hollow eyes. But I knew those eyes. I stepped to the edge of the bed. "Nora." She looked up. Her lip trembled. "You got old," she whispered. A tear slipped down her cheek. I sat down beside her, unable to speak. "They told me no one would remember," she said. "That no one would come." I asked her gently, "Who told you that?" Her gaze drifted toward the window, then back to me. "We never made it to Morning Lake," she whispered. Later that evening, I stood in front of the whiteboard back at the station. I'd cleared it that morning, but now I started tacking up names, one by one. Across the top field trip, May 19th, 1986. Beneath it, Nora Kelly found. Alive, May 5th, 2025. She was repeating herself. Same phrases. We never made it. We weren't supposed to get off the bus. The lake wasn't ready. I drove back to the hospital after dark. The doctors had finished their evaluations. No signs of long-term injury, just malnourishment and disorientation. The DNA test would take time, but I didn't need it. It was her. I found her in a quiet room. Dim lights, thin blanket pulled up to her chin. She was staring at a paper cup of water when I came in. "Hi again," I said softly. She looked up, her voice steadier this time. "You believe me, don't you?" "I do." She nodded, like she'd already accepted. Most people wouldn't. "Do you remember the bus ride?" She paused, then said, "Just the beginning." The driver wasn't the usual one. He didn't talk. And there was a man waiting at the fork in the road. He had a beard. Said the lake wasn't ready for us. Said we'd have to wait. "Did he get on the bus?" She nodded. And then I don't remember anything. I woke up in a barn, but it wasn't a barn anymore. The windows were covered. The clocks were all wrong. What do you mean? They always said it was Tuesday, even when it wasn't. They wouldn't let us talk about before. We weren't allowed to say names, only the ones they gave us. I asked who they were. There were two at first, she said. A woman and the man. She got sick, I think. He stayed. She called him Mr. Avery. I recognized the name. Frank Avery had owned property out near County Line Road. Died in '03. No known family, but he had a son, Martin Avery. Last known address unknown. Nora said they moved the children often, in vans, blindfolded. They weren't allowed to look outside, told their families had moved on, that this was their life now. Some of the kids forgot, she said, forgot their names, forgot school. But I didn't. I held on. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small laminated photo, our yearbook page. She took it, stared at it. Her hand shook. "That's me," she whispered. "And Caleb. And Marcy." She didn't finish the sentence, just pressed the photo to her chest. That night I drove out to the old barn on County Line, the one Frank Avery used to own. I didn't expect to find anything. I just had to see it. The roofline was warped. One of the doors creaked with the wind. I stepped out of the truck and scanned the grass. Something caught the light just a flicker near the side of the building. I walked over and crouched down. A bracelet. Plastic. Purple. Faded. Etched into the surface in a child's handwriting, K-I-M-I. Kimmy Leong. Age 10. Glasses. Loved drawing dinosaurs. She'd been one of the missing. I held the bracelet in my hand and looked toward the dark barn behind me. The past wasn't quiet anymore. It was starting to speak. I placed the bracelet on my desk beside the yearbook photo, called in a message to Cold Case out of Austin, asking for everything they had on Martin Avery. Didn't expect an answer that night. Didn't sleep much either. And by morning, the site near Morning Lake had something new. An investigator pulled me aside, held up a sealed bag. "You're going to want to see this," he said. Inside was a photo. Color. Curled edges. Not aged the way it should have been. 9 kids, standing in front of a building that looked like a lodge or a barn. Their faces were blank. Not scared. Just empty. In the center, Nora. Behind them, half in shadow, was a man in a wide-brimmed hat. I flipped the photo over. Written on the back in pen, "The Chosen, Year 2. That's when I knew this was bigger than any of us ever guessed. These kids didn't just disappear. They were kept. And somewhere out there, someone still wanted them forgotten. I took the photo straight to Nora. The one from the back of the bus, curled at the edges but too clean to have been buried for 40 years. When I laid it in her hands, she froze. Her fingers trembled, and for a second she just stared at it in silence. This was after the first winter, she said. They made us pose once every season, to show progress. I asked her if she remembered the building in the background. She nodded. It's where they kept us the longest. I asked if she knew where it was. She shook her head. We were blindfolded any time we were moved, but I remember sounds. A river, a whistle at sunset, and the air always smelled like burning pine. I wrote it all down. I didn't say much, but the part about the whistle stuck with me. That night I pulled up an old forestry map. North of Morning Lake, near the edge of county lines, there used to be a narrow gauge rail line logging train discontinued in the early 90s. It ran past a bend in the river, right through an area that once held a children's summer camp, Riverview Camp. Closed in '89, bought in '84 by a private trust, no public use since. The ownership trail ended in a dead file. I circled the property. I didn't sleep much. Around 5:00 a.m., I went back to the bus site. The crew was clearing more of the surrounding ground. Soil conditions were rough and preservation specialists had been called in. The bus was no longer just a crime scene. It was evidence of something else, something systemic. One of the forensic techs called me over just after sunrise. He handed me a sealed pouch. Inside was a photograph different from the one we'd already found. This one had been wedged behind a panel near the back left window. It looked newer, or at least recently placed. 9 children stood in front of a low wooden structure. Could have been a barn, could have been a lodge. Their faces were blank, no smiles, just stillness. A few of the kids I recognized immediately: Marcy, Caleb, Kimmy, Nora in the center, her green eyes staring forward. But what made my stomach drop wasn't the children. It was the man behind them, standing in the shadows of the doorway, tall-bearded, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. I turned the photo over. Written in small block letters were the words, "The Chosen, Year 2. Back at the station, I laid that photo beside the class list, the bracelet, the original field trip report. Then I started cross-referencing the old property records again. I flagged every parcel tied to the Avery family name, either Frank or Martin. Most were long sold or condemned. One stood out: Riverview Camp. It matched Nora's memory. Close to a river. Used to be on a rail line. No active record since the early 90s. I marked it for field inspection. Later that day, I returned to the hospital. I didn't say much when I came in, just held the photo out toward Nora. The moment she saw it, she gasped. Her hand went to her chest. "This was real," she whispered. "This is after the winter. They told us not to speak in the photo, not to move, just stand still." I asked if she recognized the man behind them. She hesitated. Then, "That's not Mr. Avery." She leaned closer. "That's someone worse. They called him Father Elijah, but he wasn't a priest. He just liked the sound of it." I asked her what happened to him. She shook her head. "He just stopped showing up one day, after year 3. Then we were moved again. Different place, different rules. Some didn't make it. Some forgot their own names." I didn't press her. I just sat beside her. Quiet. Let her speak on her own time. But I never forgot, she said. I tried to keep the names in my head. Kimmy, Sam, Jonah, Caleb. Then she looked at me. Some of them didn't want to be found. That evening I drove north. The road to Riverview Camp was narrow and soft with overgrowth. About a mile in, I saw the old sign, chipped wood, almost completely covered in vines. Riverview Youth Retreat, private land. I parked where the path ended and went in on foot. The woods were still, quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. I followed a dirt trail until I saw it, the structure from the photograph. It had aged, sagged at the center porch, nearly collapsed, but the layout was the same. Same siding, same window shapes. I approached slowly. Just before I reached the steps, I saw them. Footprints, small ones, maybe a child's, still fresh. I stopped moving, reached for my flashlight. My sidearm stayed in the holster, but I kept my hand near it. "Hello," I called. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm law enforcement." Silence. Then a whisper from inside. Low, childlike. "You're not supposed to be here." I moved onto the porch. The wood groaned. The door was slightly open, not forced, just loose. The smell hit immediately: stale air, metallic, like old blood and wet earth. I pushed the door open with my foot and swept the room with my light. Dust, furniture long broken, but on the far wall names. Dozens of them. Some scratched lightly, some carved deep. One name repeated 3 times. Nora. Underneath it, Kimmy Marcy Elijah, then Elijah crossed out. I walked deeper inside. My beam caught a rusted metal box beneath a broken table. I knelt and pried it open. Inside were old papers damp with time, but on top, a stack of Polaroids, bound with a rubber band. Not posed, not staged, just moments. Kids sleeping, eating, one curled in a corner crying. On the back of each photo, a different name. Not their real names. Dove. Silence. Obedience. Glory. The last one stopped me cold. A girl by a tree. Face turned, but her left arm had a purple bracelet. Same style. Same size. Kimmy. On the back, disobeyed. A floorboard creaked above me. I turned the flashlight toward the staircase. "Is someone there?" I said. "I'm here to help." Another whisper. Faint. She came anyway. I climbed slowly, one step at a time. At the top, I saw a door half open. A candle flickered inside. I pushed gently. The room was lined with children's drawings. Crude. Charcoal. One showed kids in the woods. Another, a faceless man with wings. One showed a burning bus. Beneath it, rows of graves. I turned around. A boy was standing in the doorway. Maybe 10 years old. Pale. Dirt on his cheeks. No shoes. "Who are you?" I asked. "They called me Jonah," he said. "But that's not my name." I crouched. "Do you remember your real name?" He looked down, shook his head. They took it. I asked if he was alone. He pointed past me. "There's more." I followed his gaze. Behind the bunk bed and the floorboards, more names. Not scratched. Burned into the wood. 12 in total, 3 circled, the rest crossed out. Beneath them a phrase, "Names we must not forget." I sat with him in the back of my SUV. He didn't say much, just sipped from the juice box I handed him. At the station I gave him a blanket, let him sit with the yearbook photos. He pointed to Marcy, then Sam, then my own picture. "You were supposed to come," he said. I nodded. "I got sick." He tilted his head. "That's lucky." Across town, forensics called again. They found another photo, buried beneath the floor panel of the bus. This one was burned at the edges. 4 kids around a campfire, one looking directly at the camera. In the corner, a note. He stayed. He chose to stay. I matched the face to the roster. Aaron Devlin. Quiet, bright, good at chess. 11 years old at the time. A record search showed an A. Devlin living in a trailer east of Holstead. Moved there in 2004. No high school record on file before 1990. I stared at that photo for a long time. Something in his eyes looked different. Not afraid. Not blank. Just distant. I had a name, an address, and a question I'd been waiting nearly 40 years to ask. Why didn't you come home? I found Aaron Devlin living in a single-wide trailer parked at the edge of a gravel lot outside town. The place was half buried under pine needles, siding dull with age. One porch light flickered overhead, barely holding steady. I knocked once. Nothing. Knocked again. Then a voice low and calm from just behind the door. I knew someone would come eventually. He opened it without a sound. Looked older than I expected. Gray streaks at the temples. Eyes sharp but quiet. He wore a flannel jacket, jeans, and a shirt so plain it looked deliberate. Like he didn't want to leave an impression. He studied me a second, then said, "I remember you." I didn't respond. "You used to wear braids," he said. "Green backpack. Silver zipper always got stuck." I nodded once. "Why didn't you ever come forward?" He stepped aside. "Because not everyone wanted to leave." The trailer inside was sparse but clean, no clutter. Just shelves of books, psychology group, behavior memory studies. A chessboard sat untouched on a low table. He didn't offer me coffee or a seat, just sat on the edge of the couch and folded his hands. "I left in 91, he said. "I was 16. They let me go. Let you. I was the one who stayed behind when others tried to escape. I helped them keep order. Thought it was the only way to survive. I stayed standing. And after you left, I didn't know how to be anything else. They told us the world didn't want us, that our families moved on. I believed them." His voice didn't crack, but something in his face shifted. "When I finally got out, I didn't go looking for anyone. I didn't want to find out who was missing. You could have helped." He looked away. The trail behind the fire road hadn't been maintained in decades. Pine needles lay thick across the ground, muffling every footstep. Aaron didn't speak much, just walked with that same quiet focus I remembered from the chess club. A kind of inward motion. Calculated, careful. By noon we reached a clearing. Tucked against the base of a low hill was what remained of the original structure. Half collapsed. Roof caved. A frame of old wood swallowed by vines. He paused at the edge. It used to be bigger. 4 cabins, a lodge, 2 underground rooms. What kind of rooms they called them, reflection rooms. But they were pits. No light, no noise. You were left in them until your thoughts didn't make sense anymore. He said it like he was reading from memory, not feeling it. I walked into the ruin alone. The floorboards were charred at the edges, smelled of mildew and ash. Most of it had caved in long ago, but in one corner tucked beneath a broken beam stood 3 small lockers, rusted but still upright. "These were ours," Aaron said from behind me. "We weren't allowed to keep anything from before, just uniforms, a spoon, a blank book. But some of us hid things." I opened the first locker. Empty. The second held a melted crayon and a single torn shoe. The third was different. Something wrapped in cloth. I unfolded it slowly. Inside, a cracked cassette player. A child's bracelet, purple plastic, just like the one I found near the barn, and a drawing sealed in a plastic sleeve. A girl standing on a hill under a full moon. In her hand, a sign. "We are still here." Aaron crouched beside me. Nora drew that. The day before she ran. I turned toward the ridge behind the building. "You said they scattered the rest. They moved the younger ones there. The ones too scared to run. They renamed it. Called it Haven." 2 hours later, we stood at the crest of the ridge. The sun was dipping low, casting a slant of light between the trees. Below us, half hidden by moss and branches, was a concrete structure built into the hillside. No signs, no trails, just a single steel door. "This is where they kept the quiet ones," Aaron said. "The ones too broken to question anything. They didn't teach here, just observed." I asked what that meant. "They used to say they were watching the fruit ripen, waiting for us to stop asking to leave." He placed his hand on the rusted door. "There's a room inside. They called it the garden. No lights, just voices." I asked what happened to the ones who wouldn't comply. He didn't answer. We used an emergency jack from my truck to force the door. It opened slowly with the sound of time grinding against metal. The air that came out was cold, stale, like it hadn't moved in years. The inside was a narrow corridor, concrete floors, stained walls, scratches along the lower half names, symbols tallies. Every inch told a story of someone trying not to be forgotten. To the right, a smaller door. Above it, a plaque hung crooked. "Garden." I looked at Aaron. He didn't move. I went in alone. The room was low, no windows. The air was thick. Hard to breathe. Every step felt muffled. There was no furniture, just four walls and the smell, faint but familiar. Damp earth metal and something sweeter underneath, almost like decay mixed with something chemical. My flashlight caught something in the corner, a recorder, small, black, plastic cracked at one end. I picked it up, flipped it over, etched into the back barely visible. For the ones who remember, I didn't press play, not yet. Back at the station, I handed it off to our techs. It took them hours to coax it back to life. The tape was delicate, could only be played once. I stayed alone when it was ready. I pressed play. At first static, then a voice, small, young. "This is Nora," it said. Then a pause. "I think." "I don't know anymore." Another pause. "It's dark. I think I remember school. A brother, maybe. They don't let us say our names." The voice faltered, then continued. "If anyone finds this, don't believe them. We didn't run away. We were taken. We were made into something else." Another silence. "But I'm not gone. Not yet." The tape clicked off. But it wasn't Nora's voice. It was younger, softer. I'd heard it before, in the photo, the drawings, the bracelet. Kimmy. She had been here. And maybe she still was. I brought the recorder to Nora the next morning. She was sitting up when I walked in, pale under the hospital light, but more alert than the day before. I didn't say anything at first, just pressed play. The tape was short. Static then, a young girl's voice, steady but fraying at the edges. Nora didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. When it ended, she reached for the player, held it in both hands like it might vanish. "That's her," she said. "That's Kimmy." She used to whisper into her sleeve like it was a microphone. Said if anyone ever found us, they'd need to know the truth. She paused. She never gave up, even when the others started to forget. Her eyes filled. "She's alive," she said. "I don't know how I know that, but I do." I didn't argue. Later that afternoon, Aaron came by the station with a hand-drawn map. Same one he'd shown me before, but this time he'd marked a spot near the far side of the woods beyond the second ridge. There was a hatch, he said, hidden at the base of a tree split by lightning. We used it when they didn't want us seen coming or going. He looked at me. If they were smart, it's still there. We reached it by late afternoon. The air was heavy, the forest darker than usual. Overhead, the clouds were low sky holding back rain. We found the tree just past the river bend, a tall cedar half hollow, its trunk split clean down the center. Beneath it, half buried in dirt and leaves, was a rusted metal hatch. No markings except one faint engraving near the edge, TS2. Transfer Station 2. It took 2 crowbars and a backup deputy to get it open. Cold air spilled up from below, sharp with mildew and something metallic. A ladder led down into the dark. I went first. The tunnel was narrow and dry. The walls were reinforced concrete, the floor packed dirt. The air didn't move. Every sound, the creak of boots, the knock of gear, echoed like it didn't want to fade. 20 feet down the tunnel, flattened into a corridor. Rooms branched off both sides, 10 in total. The first had a metal cot and nothing else. The second, a wall of stick figure drawings, children holding hands, a sun, a school bus disappearing over a hill. The third had a nameplate beside the door. Obedience. I started cataloging. Each room had a different name. None of them real. None from the class list. Names like Silence Glory Renewal. In the center was a larger room, round, domed at the ceiling, low fluorescent lights barely holding. 15 desks in a circle. At the center, a glass case. I broke it open gently. Inside was a leather-bound book. No title. Just a black cover, smooth with age. I opened it. The first few pages were typeset lessons, rules, chants, repetition drills. The deeper I went, the more erratic the writing became. Handwritten notes in the margins, names, dates, short lines scribbled over and over. Obedience is safety. Memory is danger. The past is infection. The future is correction. Then one name started appearing. Cassia. Sometimes written in clear script, other times crossed out, then written again. At the back of the book, one final line Cassia did not forget. Cassia ran. Cassia saw what they did in room 6. Room 6 is sealed, I radioed in, asked for a search of the structure, focused on any false walls or blocked entry points. 10 minutes later, one of the deputies called out. Behind the south corridor, behind a row of shelving units, they'd found it. A wall that didn't match the others. Slightly newer concrete, a gap along the floor. We brought in a portable jackhammer and chipped away until the seal cracked. The door behind it was wood-lined, swollen from age, but intact. We forced it open. The air inside was different, still, but charged. Room 6 wasn't a cell. It was a gallery. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds, all sizes. Children kneeling, standing in rows, blank faces. A few turned toward the camera, none smiling. In the center, a mural, painted by hand, weathered but still visible. A girl running through a pine forest, arms outstretched, face turned upward toward the light. Beneath her, written in red, Cassia remembered. She left the light on for us. I took a photo and brought it straight to the hospital. Kimmy had been moved into a recovery room on the second floor. She hadn't spoken much since being found. Barely ate. Caleb, taken from Sanctuary 1988, did not return. Marcy, escaped during fire, believed dead, not confirmed. Sam, broken hatch, no recovery. Jonah, obedient, transferred. Nora, punished, erased memory withheld. Me, waiting. Every entry grew harder to read. The pen strokes more erratic. Until the last one. If someone finds this, don't just take us back. Take us forward. Help us become real again. I copied the entries, logged the notebook, then just sat in the squad car for a while. The rain had started again, light but steady. The kind of rain that doesn't wash anything away, just settles in. I kept thinking about Cassia, about that mural, about the phrase. She left the light on for us. Whatever happened in room 6 wasn't just ritual, it was evidence, documentation, memory. She'd witnessed something. Painted it, hid it behind a wall they tried to bury, and now I needed to find out who she'd become. Because somewhere out there, Cassia had survived. She'd escaped, and if the journal was right, she left a trail behind. Not to be found, but to be followed. The mural stayed with me. The way her arms reached out not to run but to guide. Like she knew someone would follow her trail even if it took decades. Cassia hadn't just escaped. She'd left a message. And if Kimmy's journal was right, that message didn't end in room 6. The next morning I went through the notebook again, this time slowly. Page by page, line by line. Kimmy had written her entries in layers, some between the lines of doctrine, some beneath them in faded pencil. I kept finding shapes, small triangles with dots inside drawn beside random passages. One phrase kept repeating in different places, 3 stone trees. Then later, river splits, but doesn't rejoin. Finally, on the inside back cover, a curve drawn in black ink with a single X at its bend. Aaron came by that afternoon. I showed him the drawings. He leaned over the desk and traced the river with his finger. There were stories about a second tunnel, he said. The older kids called it a myth, said it didn't lead out, it led under, where the others were kept. What others? He didn't answer right away, just looked at the window, the clouds heavy beyond the trees. The ones they never wanted found, he said. The ones who didn't follow rules or didn't survive the early phases. By dawn the next day, I had a search team prepped. We hiked north past Morning Lake, cutting through an area that hadn't been surveyed in years. Most of the forest was dry from a late-season drought. The riverbed was low mud exposed along the banks. I followed the directions as best I could past a fallen cedar, past the second ridge until we found it. 3 petrified trees, standing together like a monument, stone gray, brittle, unnatural against the green around them. Below the river split in 2, and just off the bend under layers of moss and dead pine, the shape of a hatch. Steel, round, heavier than the one near the lightning tree. This one was fused with rust, and someone had bolted it shut from the outside. I brushed away the dirt until the top panel was clear, engraved faintly into the metal TS2, Transfer Station 2. We used bolt cutters to break the seal. A cold rush of air hit us from below, dry, sour, unmoving. I went in first. The shaft dropped straight down about 15 feet, then leveled out into a wider corridor. The walls were reinforced concrete, smooth and unmarked. This place hadn't been touched in years, but it was cleaner than it should have been, preserved. There were 10 small rooms off the main hall, each no bigger than a walk-in closet. Beds, thin mattresses, 1 or 2 with drawings scratched into the walls, stick figures. One showed a school bus on a hill, another 3 kids holding hands. No names. Then we reached the central room. It was circular like the one beneath Haven, but the air was colder, more sterile. In the middle stood 15 desks arranged in a tight ring. Each one had a nameplate. Some names I recognized. Others I didn't. On the far wall was a display case. Inside, sealed behind glass, was another book. This one bound in black leather like the first, but heavier. We broke the glass and opened it. The inside was worse than the last. The first half was curriculum. Lessons. Drills. Some typed, some handwritten. The language shifted halfway through structured at first, then messy. Repeated phrases scribbled in the margins. The past is infection. The future is correction. Then a name written over and over, Cassia. Sometimes in black ink, sometimes in red. Then crossed out. At the very back, a final page Cassia did not forget. Cassia ran. Cassia saw what they did in room 6. Room 6 is sealed. We fanned out checking every wall. The far corridor had an uneven panel, slightly different color, smoother texture. I tapped it. Hollow. We called for tools and started clearing it out. It took over 2 hours to break through the false wall. The concrete was thicker than the others. Poured more recently, like someone had sealed it after the fact. When we finally opened it, dust poured into the hallway. Room 6. No beds, no furniture, just photographs. Hundreds of them, tacked to the walls, pinned in overlapping layers. Children, always children. Some in uniforms, some kneeling, others sitting cross-legged in rows. Blank stares. None of the photos were labeled, but some faces were familiar. Others, not at all. In the center of the far wall was another mural, painted in faded colors but still intact. A girl running through trees, arms open, head tilted toward the sky. Behind her, the faint outline of other children faces turned away. And below it, Cassia remembered. She left the light on for us. I took a photo and brought it to Kimmy later that night. She sat up the moment she saw it. No hesitation. One of the transfer files I'd pulled earlier listed a Jane Doe placed in foster care in 1992, no name, no memory. Later renamed Maya Ellison. Adopted in Morning Lake the year after the group homes shut down. Worked at the local bookstore. Known for remembering customers' names from years back. No formal schooling on record before the mid-90s. I drove to the shop just before closing, Maya stood behind the counter, shelving a stack of paperbacks. She looked up and smiled the way people do when they've seen you before but can't quite place where. "Sheriff," she said, "mystery section's been busy today." I walked up slowly, pulled the photo from my pocket. "Do you know who Cassia is?" She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. Then quietly I used to dream about her. She picked up the photo, hands trembling. I thought she was made up, a girl I invented. She'd say things I didn't understand about tunnels and names and light. Her voice broke. I thought it was trauma. Inside 4 cassette tapes. Unlabeled. 1 notebook. A photo envelope. We listened to the first tape that afternoon. A man's voice. Calm, even. Subject 3A has not responded to conditioning. Speech patterns indicate memory retention. Isolation required. The second voice, female. Young, barely above a whisper. My name is Cassia. They took it away, but I kept it. They can't take what I don't say out loud. Click. Next tape. Subject 3A claims knowledge of fire origin. No records confirm. More silence. Then Cassia again. Fire didn't come from us. It came from fear. They tried to burn the files. Tried to burn the truth. Click. Third tape. Subject 3A removed from cohort permanently. Assigned to TS2 observation. Long-term memory degradation expected. Cassia again. If this reaches anyone, I left drawings. I left maps. I left words in places they didn't think to look. The others forgot because they were told to. But some part of me, I buried it in sound. Click.